Welcome to Unboxing History. I'm Christine Hopkins, a Galveston author and a local expert, and
I'm Jodi Wright, Gidley, director of the Galveston County Museum.
every month as part of this Unboxing History podcast, we're going to unveil a treasure that's part of the collection of the Galveston County Museum. So this month, Jodi, what's our treasure?
Well, let's take a look.
We have a couple of things.
So we have a deck of cards, but this is not just any deck of cards. This is a deck of cards that was used at the Balinese Room in Galveston. This was donated by the estate of Edward Randolph Jr. She was a manager at the Balinese in the late 1940s and early 1950s.
Oh, wow.
This deck of cards is sealed. The cards are sealed in wax because if you were playing, you'd always start with a new sealed deck. This deck's never been opened.
That's amazing. What else do we have?
We have a couple of other things from the Turf Athletic Club and Balinese. There's a cup and a business card.
So this could have been used at any club, apparently.
It could have, yeah. So this is also a business card that is from the Turf Beer Garden, and it says, "We deliver anything at any time, day or night." Interesting.
I wonder what they delivered. Don't forget the cup. And so now we're going to talk to our guest to hear more about the Maceos and their contributions to Galveston. If you're familiar with the history of Galveston, you've heard of the Maceos, who were known for the Balinese Room and other clubs in Galveston, including the Hollywood Dinner Club. So today we have Kimber Fountain, who is the author of The Maceos and the Free State of Galveston, an authorized history. And she's really an expert on the Maceos and their contributions to Galveston. So Kimber, for people that haven't heard of the Maceos,
Sure.
Can you tell us a little bit about who they were and how they came from being barbers to club owners?
Sure. And they have a very interesting story. Of course, they immigrated from Sicily, ended up in Galveston sometime in the 1910s. And then, yes, they were barbers. They were making 25 cents a haircut at a shop that was on 25th Street downtown. But there was just something about these guys, is the way I like to put it, quite simply. They had vision. They were kind of born entrepreneurs. They were born entertainers. But the one thing that they did not have was capital, right? There's not really much wiggle room when you're, making 25 cents a haircut. So they reluctantly decided to start investing into rum running with the onset of alcohol prohibition. Now, they were terrified of being deported because they did not want to go back to Sicily. They wanted to stay in the United States, but they were just kind of willing to take that risk because they needed that financial impetus, in order to fulfill their vision and their dreams. But almost immediately, the trajectory that the Maceo brothers were on completely diverged from that of the other low-level criminals who were simply content running rum. And within a year, they opened up their very first restaurant. And actually, a very little known fact is that prior to that, their very first business, or legitimate business, well, it wasn't really legit. It was, on paper, it was a soft drink stand, which during Prohibition was like a code word for a bar, right? Where you could go get a nice, refreshing cola. I use a lot of air quotes in this history. Anyway, but shortly after that, they opened up their very first restaurant on the seawall at 21st Street, across from the Hotel Galvez. Now, of course, if you're familiar with the history, you're jumping ahead of me and you know that this is the exact location of the Balinese Room. But what is lesser known is that in its very first incarnation, it was blended and it made headlines all over. It was the most luxurious thing that had ever hit the Gulf Coast. They modeled it after a cafe in New York City. So they really just pulled out all the stops and really made their mark with that very first restaurant. And then after that, they were asked to invest in the Hollywood Dinner Club.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, I never realized that.
Yeah.
Well, so, of course, we know them for the Balinese. We know them for the Hollywood Dinner Club. But they had, like you said, a soda shop. But they had some other legitimate businesses all over Galveston and Galveston County. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Of course. Yeah. They, here's the thing about the Maceos. What I discovered when I was, really doing the deep dive into them, and, because I'm really curious as an historian as to why things happen, not just what is happening, right? So I was really interested, in who the Maceos were and why they were doing what they were doing. And what I discovered was that really at the core of everything that they did was this real genuine love for Galveston. And my theory is that because they are originally from Palermo, Palermo is on the northern coast of Sicily. It's known for its palm trees and its citrus trees and its ocean air. And so I even get chills even now when I still say this. But so my theory is that they were drawn to Galveston because it reminded them of home, because there's really no logical reason that they had to move here. You know, they were in Louisiana with their family. So they had this real genuine love, and they also had a vision for it. They really looked at Galveston and thought that it could really truly be an internationally renowned luxury resort destination. And so that was really at the basis of everything they did. But then what that made them realize was that in order for their so-called illegitimate businesses to flourish, they had to make sure that Galveston's legitimate businesses flourish.
Gotcha.
Because there had to be some sort of a foundation. There had to be an anchor, you know, and so they really promoted Galveston a lot as far as the seawall went. I think we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. But they were also oil speculators. You know, I mean, they had, you know, from you name it, you know, they had all sorts of entertainment venues as well, in addition to their gambling houses. And they were generous philanthropists as well. They were very keen. They had an ear to the ground in the city all the time. They knew who needed something, who was hurting, who, you know, and oftentimes unsolicited, you know, they would jump in and offer their assistance to local residents as well. So that is really what formed the basis for why the Free State of Galveston lasted 40 years, you know.
Why it thrived.
And why it thrived, you know. It thrived because of their leadership, you know, more than anything. Yeah.
Well, so during the era of Prohibition, going through illegal gambling in Galveston, how at the height of it, which I don't know what year that would have been, but at the height of it, how many speakeasies and so forth clubs do you estimate were in Galveston and maybe even Galveston County, including those owned by the Maceos? I'm sure there are other people.
There were lots of others. So the peak was actually like, it just kept growing until it was shut down.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. It never plateaued. It never fell off. It just kept going upwards until 1957 when the city was raided. So in 1957, in the paperwork for that the Attorney General had, you know, on the basis for his raids, there were 42 gambling houses and bars in Galveston.
On Galveston Island.
On Galveston Island. 42.
Wow.
And the important thing to know about that as well is that only a handful of those were actually owned by the Maceos.
Really?
Yes. That was another token of their leadership, is that they applied this unsurprisingly successful laissez-faire approach to business here. They didn't stamp out the competition. You know, there was no coercion. No sawed-off shotguns, you know, exploiting people. It was nothing like that. They simply set the ber. You know, they set the standard, and then everyone else kind of rose to that, which I think is really great. Another thing that they had, though, really going for them was was discretion. So, and that word was very important back then, or at least the theme of it was, because none of this could have survived if people weren't discreet. You know, we had senators and other politicians and celebrities, you know, down here going to our red light district and going to our gambling houses. And we weren't going to be able to continue that if we weren't discreet about it. But the way that they developed that discretion was really through establishing trust with the rest of the city. And part of that was through that philanthropy, as well as the economic stimulus simply that they provided. You know, unlike the industry of the late 19th century and early 20th centuries, the Maceos weren't just trying to enrich themselves. You know, they were really trying
enriching the whole city.
The whole city.
Well, and I mean, I think it was interesting. I was reading in your book that it was safer. I mean, they had the police had a smaller job because there was so much money moving around the island that they had their own security detail, and so people knew they also needed to be on their best behavior around that security detail as well. And one of the other things that I was reading in your book, which I never knew, which was really interesting, was when they opened the Hollywood Club, which was only, as you said, open for 2 seasons.
Yeah.
It was very innovative. I mean, they were very forward thinking.
Yes, very much so.
Tell us, I mean, for people that don't know, where was the Hollywood Club and why was it important? Because it really gave us a whole bigger audience for Galveston.
It did. It did. It was really the catalyst that set everything off, and even is still influential even today in the United States.
Interesting.
Yes. So like I mentioned, the Maceos were asked to invest in a new dinner club opening up out on 61st Street. So, but what's important to understand here is that at the time, 61st Street was not the thoroughfare that it is today. It actually was not even inside the city limits. It was a 2-lane dirt road.
Really?
It was because Count City at the time, I think, ended at 57th Street.
Okay.
Around there. And so it was just county. And, it was not the big, 6-lane, thing we have today. And so Sam and Rose, in their, their genius, ideating, they decided to take this simple dinner club and make it into a luxury casino. And the Hollywood Dinner Club on the corner of Stewart Road and 61st Street, unfortunately, it's a gas station now. There's nothing left. But it became the very first place in the nation where you could get high-end gambling, gourmet food, and high-class entertainment all together under one roof. Now, today, we can buy a $75 flight to Las Vegas, right?
Sure.
So that doesn't seem like that big of a deal to us because Las Vegas is so iconic. But the Maceos were the ones who invented that template. And in fact, what the Maceos did with the Hollywood Dinner Club and later the Balinese actually was picked up by the American mafia and used to make Las Vegas into what it is today.
Interesting.
Yeah, but all of that started right here on Galveston Island. And, and back in 1926, nothing like this had ever been done before. It was revolutionary. Sure, there were casinos, but they were mostly like, back alley, like dark rooms. There was no spectacle. It was just about the game and the gambling. And the Maceos turned it into a spectacle. And the result is, a United States destination that is iconic, and known the world over for what it offers. And that was the Maceos' idea.
And it was air conditioned.
Air conditioned, yes, that was.
And Guy Lombardo performed there. He was the first. For those that who don't know, look him up. He was very famous at the time. And then also they had one of the first radio broadcasts, which again, I mean, that's really something. So I think I read 3 times a week. They did a live broadcast from the Hollywood Dinner Club. And so people who couldn't afford to go there could still enjoy the music. I mean, I just think that
it's
is
fantastic.
amazing.
And that is really a testament to, again, who the Maceos were, right? Because there was no silver spoon, with this family. They were born penniless. They had a really rough young childhood in Sicily. And then, I mean, I don't know if you can even imagine spending 3 weeks on a citrus boat, coming over to the United States. And then, and so they were always really in touch with the population of Galveston. I don't want to say the common people because
sure.
that's, in general, with the general public, they didn't sequester themselves up in towers, and they didn't, alienate themselves from the rest of the town. They were very much into, and really that's what Galveston was even before the Maceos got here. But the Maceos really, kind of latched onto that and really made that trust and that commonality within the Galveston community just so much stronger, which is really cool.
So I was reading, we know about the gambling and the speakeasies and the Hollywood Dinner Club and the Balinese and so forth. But then they also established the Galveston Beach Association in 1920.
Yeah.
And they hired, I'm looking at my notes, William Rowe to market Galveston.
Yeah.
And I was reading about that, and that's incredible. I think a lot of people, including me, didn't know that they had a role in a lot of other things that people have probably seen photos of. So speak to that.
Sure. Well, again, that goes back to what I said earlier about how the Maceos realized that their businesses relied on the success of Galveston as a whole, not just their individual businesses. And so, yes, before they had even opened their first restaurant, before gambling was even a glimmer in the eye of the Maceos here in Galveston, they hired this man named William Rowe, who was a pretty famous promoter at the time. He worked for a lot of major companies all over the United States and so he is the one really who developed this marketing plan to bring attention to the seawall. And so one of the first things that he did was introduce what was called this pageant of pulchritude. Now, many of you know the Bathing Beauties contest, and of course that wonderful piece of Galveston trivia that all of us love, that eventually that would go on to be the Miss Universe pageant. And so, yes, that was started by William Rowe, but there's another little piece of this that often gets lost, and that is that the pageant of pulchritude in its original state was actually not a beauty contest.
Oh,
It was a fashion contest.
really?
Yes, the whole point was to infuse the seawall with couture fashion and to bring one-of-a-kind designs and labels and designers from all over the world to Galveston to display their fashion. So again, that just, to me, illustrates the elevated mindset that they had. You know, they weren't just trying to do cheap little sensational, oh, let's just put half naked women up there. You know what I mean? It wasn't about that. It was actually about bringing culture and sophistication and high art to Galveston as well, which I think is really cool.
Well, and they started the car races on the
They did.
beachfront, and they started Splash Day, right?
No, Splash Day wasn't until the 60s.
Okay.
That was later.
Okay.
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
but they had their role in a lot of things that was happening on the seawall.
They did. They built a lot of some of the amusement parks that were on the seawall as well and invested in those, like ones that had the little rides, you know, where you could go around and around in little metal cars or airplanes or whatever they were, stuff like that.
Well, and I mean, it's really interesting. Like, again, I had no idea about that part of it, that it all makes sense because it goes hand in hand with tourism and making Galveston an appealing place to visit, and then hopefully going and having dinner and spending some money and doing a little gambling too. So what do you think? I mean, I know we've talked a lot about what people probably didn't know, but what do you think that would surprise people the most about the Maceos that you haven't spoke to? I know that's probably hard, but...
No, it's not hard at all, actually. There's one very specific story that comes to mind because it's, again, it brings us into the 21st century. This is not, and that's the thing I love about this history, is that this history does not exist in a vacuum back, you know, between 1920 and 1960. This history is still living and thriving today, or at least Galveston is still thriving today because of it. So again, I mentioned the Maceos Philanthropy. So one thing that they were often known to do was to help local families with the tuition for college students.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And so they happened to have this one employee who had been an employee for a long time of theirs. And he was a Greek immigrant, actually, and had been a very loyal employee to Sam and Rose. And one time they were having a conversation, and he looks at, you know, his bosses, Sam and Rose, and he says, gentlemen, he's like, I really have a problem. He's like, I don't know what to do. He said, my son. He's like, you should meet my son. This guy is a genius, you know, but he said, I have a really big problem. And that's that I don't have the money to send him to college. And this father was just heartbroken, you know, because he didn't have the means to provide for this brilliant son of his to go to college. And so, of course, the Maceos stepped in and they paid full tuition for this employee's son to attend Texas A&M University, Galveston. And the name of that son was George P. Mitchell.
Oh my God. I mean,
I chills,
I know,
right?
Really?
I know. Me too. Every time. But I've been talking about this stuff for like years, you know, every time. And so, of course, George Mitchell would go on to become a billionaire in the oil industry, but he would also turn around and invest over $300 million into the restoration and renovation of downtown Galveston. He's the one who brought Mardi Gras back. He's the reason the Strand is what it is today, and that all of those buildings stand, and then even the Tremont House and the Galvez and, you know, and the San Luis, all of these wonderful properties. And none of that would have happened without the Maceos.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact of the matter is that the Galveston that we are today, with the arts and the culture and the wonderful restaurants and the dining and the live music, that culture that we have today, to me, that was a blossoming of this kind of dormant flower left behind by the Maceos. You know, that is not the result of us being a cotton port in the 19th century. You know, who we are today is because of the Maceos. And so that was why I really felt such a connection and such a purpose with this history, because it was buried for so long, yet it is the critical singular identifier, or, you know, really evolutionary piece in Galveston's history of why we are what we are today, you know, and we have to give them credit for that, for sure.
Well, oh my gosh, Kimber, thank you so much.
Very
I mean,
welcome.
this has been a real pleasure. So if you haven't seen it, this is Kimber's book, The Maceos and the Free State of Galveston, an authorized history. And also you've written some other books. Tell us about that.
Yeah, sure. I've written 3 books on Galveston history, the Galveston Seawall Chronicles, the book on Galveston's Red Light District, as well as the Maceos and the Free State of Galveston. I am from a nationwide publisher, so my books are available anywhere books are sold. But if you would like a signed, autographed copy of this book, I do those. I sell those personally, and it's at booksbykimber.com. Booksbykimber.com, and I actually deliver free anywhere on Galveston Island, and then I can ship anywhere in the United States. But I'm also the owner and operator of the Red Light District Tours of Galveston. That meets at 7 o'clock Thursday, Friday, and Saturday nights. Now, there are some other red light tours out there, so just make sure that when you're looking that up, that you make sure it's the tour from yours truly. But I'm also a professional speaker. I do writing and history lectures all over Southeast Texas. And so I'm available for events as far as that goes as well. And you can find out any other information about me at kimberfountain.com.
Thanks so much, Kimber. This was so much fun. And like I said, it was really enlightening when you think about the things that have affected Galveston, the 1900 storm, Beaumont and Spindletop really hurt us as well. But then in the 20s, you had this resurgence and this vision from the Maceos and then eventually even Mr. Mitchell's impact. I mean, all those things have made the island what it is. And I think Galveston continues to grow and prosper because of their vision.
Yeah, we do, for sure. They set a good example for us to follow, I think, for sure. Well, gambling included. Wink, wink.
Thanks so much.
Sure. All right. Thank you, Christine.
I would love to travel back in time and see a show at the Hollywood Dinner Club or the Balinese and have a good meal. That would be great.
I mean, if you think about, like Kimber was saying, the vision of the Maceos and even their help to Mr. Mitchell and what an impact that made to Galveston. I think it's something that a lot of people didn't realize. That yes, they had the gambling and the speakeasies and all of those things, but then also they had such an influence on the tourism in general in Galveston.
Yeah.
So tell us more about the exhibit here that is on the Maceos and some of the things that people would see when they come to visit the museum.
Sure. So we have a small section of the museum that has photos from the Maceo clubs. We have a chair from the Balinese. Different archival pieces like stationery, a membership application to the Balinese. So we have some really cool things that you'll see if you come to the museum.
Well, and so when people come to the museum, where will they find the exhibit? And how much time should they plan to spend here?
Well, if you come to the museum, plan to spend about an hour to look all around. And then the part where you can see the Balinese artifacts are just right inside the entrance to the right. And we'll show you if you come.
Well, and the other fun part about that area is when we featured this in another podcast is the movie that was shown at the Martini Theater. It was a marketing video for Galveston, which kind of takes you back in history as well. And so I'm sure there are people that may have those interesting treasures that are remnants of that time of the Balinese, the Hollywood Dinner Club, and even other bars or speakeasies and clubs throughout Galveston County. How can people put them on loan or donate them to the county museum?
Yeah, so we take in donations from the community all the time. That's how our collection is made. If you'd like to make a donation, just contact us. We'll talk about it, and you'll have a little paperwork to do. We also do take loans. So if you've got something you're not really ready to part with forever, but you want to let other people see it, we take loans and can put your things on exhibit here. So just give us a call or an email.
And the county museum is located at?
We are inside the courthouse at 722 Moody or 21st Street.
And it is open Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 10 to 4. And on Tuesdays and Thursdays, what's special about Tuesdays and Thursdays here at the museum?
Yeah, so we're free on the Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. And on Tuesdays and Thursdays are the days that you can book a tour with us or play our padlock mystery game that is becoming more and more popular. It's a fun game you can play inside the museum, so you should play.
Well, check it out and follow us on Unboxing History every month for a new podcast to learn more about what's featured as part of the County Museum collection. Join us next month for another episode of Unboxing History. Please make sure to follow and comment and share this podcast with everyone who loves history.